Hello, welcome to today's Asia Institute webinar. My name is Melissa Conley-Tyler and I'm an Honorary Fellow at the Asia Institute at the University of Melbourne and Program Lead at AP4D, the Asia Pacific Diplomacy, Defence and Development Dialogue. Today's discussion is going to look around the topic of what does Southeast Asia want from Australia? And this is to coincide with an article that's just been released today, straight off the presses, by Melbourne Asia Review, the publication of the Asia Institute, sharing its research widely. I put that link in the chat so you can have a look, and I'm also sharing my screen so you can see what we're looking at here today. So to help respond to this and to answer that question, what does Southeast Asia want from Australia, we're going to have a conversation, and it'll be very much conversation style, with three fantastic experts from the region. So I warmly welcome Professor Fitriani from Universitas, Indonesia.
Hello, hi Melissa, hi.
Thank you very much for joining us. I welcome Shahriman Lockman from ISIS Malaysia.
Hi Melissa, thanks for having me today.
Great. And I welcome Shahriman, who's from the Cambodian Institute for Cooperation and Peace. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Well, I've asked our experts to respond to some of the propositions that have come out of the research I've been doing so far with AP4D. And the first one was a clear message that the region does not want to be treated as a theatre of great power competition. I think that's something you can see often when we hear people talk in Australia about why should we care about Southeast Asia. Often it's about the importance geopolitically of the region. Why is that the wrong way to approach it, Evie? And we'll just get you to come off mute. So
sorry. Thanks, Melissa. I think there is more than just geopolitical rivalry in Southeast Asia. There are very long history and actually very strong connection both with Australia and Asia in Southeast Asia. So just treat Southeast Asia as theater of the major power competition, I think we'll lose a lot of possibility for future better relations in the region, because Australia is one of ASEAN dialogue partners, right? And there will be a lot of things that ASEAN and Southeast Asian countries could do with Australia rather than just entangles in the great power competition, because there is an original relation between these areas with Australia. I think that's, I think at this time I would like to answer that.
Yeah, and being a dialogue partner is so much more. It's something special. Having a comprehensive strategic partnership with ASEAN, that's not something that has happened with one of the dialogue partners before. So it suggests a bigger approach. So Shahriman, what's your view on this? I know you've written about how Southeast Asia often finds it hard to understand Australia's approach. I'm interested in your view on this.
Well, thanks, Melissa. I think Southeast Asia, sometimes we rely on certain tropes about Australia. The sort of thing that was really established, set up, I mean, that became a thing in the 90s, basically, the whole deputy sheriff thing and such. I'm sorry to bring it up so early in this webinar, but, so that there are all these very simple stereotypes about Australia that sometimes pervade Southeast Asian discourse about the country. But I agree with Ibu Evie. I think there's lots more happening in Southeast Asia than great power competition. But I would modify the proposition to do not treat Southeast Asia as solely a theater of great power competition. It is a theater of great power competition. That is a fact, and Australia needs to treat it as such. But this is so the reason there is some allergy towards saying that you should treat this as a great power competition arena is because we want to be treated, we want to be valued as countries in ourselves rather than as a conduit to something else. Yeah. So I think that is the crux of the matter. I think in Southeast Asia, there is a growing realization that we need Australia to be, I mean, at least some of us think that Australia needs to be part of this pushback against China. I mean, we are not totally disinterested. We are not totally, entirely ambivalent about the whole thing. There is some anxiety about China among some countries, especially Vietnam, to a certain extent, the Philippines, Malaysia. There's some growing anxiety there. Singapore, Indonesia. The fact that the Indonesians are buying so much military equipment, that is not for Malaysia. Yeah, we sometimes think it's about Malaysia or Singapore. No. That is about some other big country up north.
Something else.
Yeah.
And pretending that doesn't exist is not a sensible approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think it's a modification to the proposition, not just a theater, but it is a theater. Yeah.
Accept the reality, but don't see it as important in itself rather than as an end. I understand. Well, Shahriman, over to you from Cambodia. I think a lot of the time when Cambodia is mentioned in Australian debate, the geopolitical angle comes in and how we discuss it. What's your reaction to this?
Thanks, Melissa. I just want to add to what Shahriman and pick up one angle that, as a matter of fact, that Southeast Asia should not be treated as a theater. In fact, in my view, I think great power competition is inevitable, especially in the current trend. So Southeast Asia is a theater, and it's not arguable. It's the facts. But the point is, how should we actually maneuver from that? How should we balance it out? While Shahriman was saying that for some countries, some countries look to Australia as more like ways to sort of curb China influence or growth. I rather see having Australia as another partners, just also to link to what Evie has mentioned earlier. Australia as the comprehensive strategic partnership of ASEAN. So we were not, in my view, I think Australia is being seen as another potential partners rather than using this partner to curb the other partners or to soften or to balance out the other one. So that at least in my view. Thank you.
That makes perfect sense. And that probably leads very well into the next proposition, which is that we really have to respond to Southeast Asia's priorities. And I think you were starting with that, Shahriman. So do you want to talk more? I'll stick with you for the moment about what you see some of those priorities as being and how Australia should be contributing.
Is that
let's stick with you, Shahriman. Yeah. What's your feeling on that?
I was hearing like.
Oh, this is my accent is so terrible. I do apologize.
No, not all. My bad. Well, priority for us, I think I do agree with what the article has written. Where now the world is facing a COVID-19 pandemic. We're already talking about post-COVID-19 recovery, not knowing when it will end. But I think to have a futuristic thinking of a post-recovery, that is something rather important. Of course, by COVID-19, it's by post-COVID-19, it's, I think, in my view, it's more than just economically and socially, but it's also geopolitically, politically, and strategically, in a sense. COVID-19 has rather changed a lot of things, including post-COVID-19 world order, if you like to call it. And to a certain extent, our priority, I think, in Southeast Asia would primarily, of course, socio-economic recovery. But what's beyond that is that has COVID-19 rather changed the world order at large? Has COVID-19 prompted us to think of something else beyond the existing regional order that we are facing? Australia.
How do you see that playing out? How do you think it has changed the world order?
I think a lot has been changed. Geopolitics become more tense, in fact, during and then also anticipated to be after the pandemics. And by that rolling out, what are some other agendas that other countries has on board? Has countries changed their positions or twist their positions from that? And yeah, that I think would be our priority.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I'll go backwards again. So Shahriman this time, and I'll try and be clearer. What's your view on this? There's some really interesting ideas there, and particularly on this issue of what are the priorities for the region.
Yeah, I think, Melissa, I'm afraid if this were an essay question for an exam, I would be a total failure. You'll mark me for an F, simply because I honestly and genuinely think that Australia has really met a lot of is really catering to many of Southeast Asia's interests in its engagement with us. I mean, maybe because I printed out this propaganda from your DFAT, right? Which
and it was successful. That's great.
Which was given to me very quickly by a good friend of mine at the Australian High Commission in KL. So you see, you do have very good diplomats, not only because they are responsive to my queries, but because I think that Australia genuinely puts a lot of resources into engaging South Asian countries. The items under the ASEAN-Australia Comprehensive Partnership, there's something quite overwhelming about the whole thing. 154 million in new investments, $1 billion in ODA for Southeast Asia in 2021 to 2022. Don't tell the people who listen to Sydney 2GB about that; they'll be furious, right? I mean, this is a lot of resources going to. I think, of all the embassies, at least as I observe it from KL, of all the embassies in the foreign embassies, I think Australia does a fantastic job at that.
We love the positive feedback, but I think in just raw terms, it's absolutely true. The amount of funds that Australia has put into the region since 2020 has been the biggest investment since the tsunami. So from that perspective, there really is money going where the mouth is, and it's across a whole range of different initiatives. So I don't think that's just propaganda.
No. Yeah, well, this is just the nice printout that I have. I'll go to the DFAT website. I think so there as well. But I should also add this. And I don't mean you, Melissa. I mean in general the people who work on Asia in Australia. There is a distinct tendency for those who work on Asia in Australia to be really self-critical. To be critical of Australia to the point of self-flagellation. Oh, Australia is not doing enough. We don't have people learning Bahasa Indonesia in our schools. The numbers are dropping, so on and so forth. But those things are right. They are correct. And it is true that you don't have a prime minister who is quite as pro-Asian engagement as you might have had in the past. This one doesn't speak Mandarin, but you know what? The previous one who spoke Mandarin wasn't that great either. So, I think we need to be very realistic about things and see the good and the bad. I think in general, and I say this not just because I'm speaking to many an Australian audience, I think you've done pretty well.
Well, I've got to go to Ibu with that. So what do you think? Is Australia doing pretty well? Are we responding?
I agree with Shahriman and Shahriman regarding Australian relation and support for Southeast Asia so far. There's been quite a lot of also scholarship, don't forget, and support for academic relation in the region from Australia. I think to some extent Australia have done much better than other great power or major power have done to Southeast Asia. What I'm interested to point out in this opportunity is to go beyond the government to government relations. Business to business relationship, okay, if you see this investment figures, but if you check it further, it's much more on the big enterprise issues rather than more to more elites, economic elites circle rather than go beyond to the common people. So if Australia and Southeast Asia would like to build a more genuine and strong and sustainable relation for in the future, I think it's important to go beyond these economic figures and see the social and cultural relations of the people, not only the government and the business relations. And this is where I think the essence of the relation should be, because trust building will develop from there. I will refer to Melissa's first question regarding Southeast Asia as theater of the major power competition. Obviously, Australian elites will think like Australian strategic analysts will think like that, because they always link Australia with the American alliance and the Western groups. And there has not much changed since many years ago, many years back to the Menzies period that put Australia under this Western alliance. What in the future we need is the young generation in Australia and Southeast Asia that could go beyond that kind of relation, maybe to establish a more genuine relation with Southeast Asia, between Southeast Asia and Australia, and to build another perspective. Australia is here in Asia, and this is one I would like to pose a question related to Melissa about to what extent Australia still think it's part of Asia. If it is still part of Asia, it's maybe time to think, not to think, maybe we cannot push Australia to go away from the American alliance, but there is a different context and different geopolitical reality in Southeast Asia that maybe Australia need to think about. But I heard there has been quite a lot of discussion also in Australia about this strategic alliance with the United States. There is another alternative in Asia. There is another environment in Asia that Australia should start build a close relation with the region. So I'm thinking about I'm thinking more beyond this economic and strategic relations, actually more on the people and social and cultural engagement in Asia.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, and to respond to that, I think, my third point is all around shared interests. And I think that's a different frame. If I look back at the way Australia has often seen its relationship with Southeast Asia, there's been the sense that we want to be helpful, but that we're a bit of an outsider, we're a bit detached. And I think what we're looking for, and the new narrative we're trying to create, is one that's much more about a shared future. And so I'm just sharing a link with our audience to the reports that have just come out of my organisation, the Asia Pacific Development Diplomacy and Defence Dialogue, which looks at how can Australia create a shared future with the region. And I think, following on from what you say, Evie, that it's not just about government. In fact, out of all of the actors, I think government is probably the one that sees the opportunity most and is doing the most. It's also about business and civil society and a whole range of other actors seeing the benefit in working together. So we talk a lot about how Australia can be a partner, an effective security partner, a partner for climate leadership, a partner in civil military cooperation, in recovery and growth, and how we can be a strategic actor overall. So that's I suppose my answer to that that long-term identity debate we've had. I don't know whether we're Asian or not. I'm not sure it's I'm sure it's a very interesting question, but I think we have a shared future, and that's what we should focus on. Fantastic. Well, Shahriman, can I go to you? We're talking a bit about shared interest. Tell me a bit more about that and what you're saying.
So, Melissa, this is by far my favorite section of your article. I would really encourage everyone to have a look, read the whole article, but read part 3 especially, because I think you've really brought out the complexities of the issue of this shared interest thing. You mentioned about Quad, you mentioned about AUKUS, the very things that make Australia seem like an outsider. And my response to that is, do not be afraid to be an outsider. I think Australia should be what it is. There are distinct advantages to be gained from your alliance with the United States. The trouble with, I think there's a slight trouble with the Australian discourse about your great turning moments, right? Your great turning moments usually involves turning from one great power to another. So that great, that speech, John Curtin.
Great and powerful friend thing.
Yeah. In 1941, you turn from the Brits to the Americans. And so the way there is a tendency for Australia to frame things in terms of shifting from one to the other. And I don't think that is the case. I think several leaders understood that this needn't be the case. Howard didn't think that it was necessary, but some academics have written in such a way that you might have to choose. I think I think Australia needs to remain a country that is able to speak with a certain attachment to the American alliance, with a certain commitment to things like human rights. I think Australia should not be afraid to engage Southeast Asian countries on the basis of human rights, even though it might annoy some of our autocrats. And yes, we have more autocrats now than ever before. As you've pointed out, COVID-19 has made it, has exacerbated this issue. So I think being better friends with South Asia does not mean becoming more like us, or becoming Asian, or becoming some other kind of identity. I think it's just like, I think Japan brings a certain flavor and set of advantages to their relationship with South Asia. India brings a certain set of advantages to its relationship with South Asia. I think Australia also brings, it has its own comparative advantages here. But there is a risk of overstepping. So yes, like I said, human rights thing, don't be afraid to raise it. Of course, there is no sense of being overbearing about it either. So this is about calibration. This is not about, this is not a black and white proposition. It's not an either or thing. I think Australia ought to be sensitive to the interests of Southeast Asian, especially governments, because ultimately that's your first point of contact. I agree, you need to engage with civil society, but the reality is that you're dealing with governments as in the first instance. But yeah, there's no sense in going the whole hog, basically. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and look, they're very interesting points. That idea that we don't need to be more like Southeast Asia. We bring our own background, our own history, our own alliances to the region. I put that in the article as you don't have to be neutral to be useful. There are ways that Australia, despite its alignment, can be very, very useful for the region. But on that issue around human rights and how I'm hearing we're true to ourselves, but we're also sensitive, perhaps, in how we go about it. Jodie, do you want to come in on that? I mean, how much do you see those issues, human rights issues, around our shared interests, and whether that's a barrier for Australia in the region?
Thank you, Melissa. In fact, like if I'm not 100% sure of some other Southeast Asia countries, but from my observation in Cambodia, Australia is a little bit distant from human rights and democracy aspect in Cambodia. I think I used to joke around that, well, maybe because US and the EU has done enough. So that's probably why. But the interesting approach, or rather direction, that Australia take in Cambodia is that Australia trying to support us in what they think we need. So of course, Australia is a little bit short on FDI to Cambodia, but a lot of ODA, official development assistance to Cambodia. Recently, Australia just launched that Mekong Australia partnerships, And that has hugely supported the Mekong countries. But primarily in Cambodia, Australia is one of the biggest supporter in clean energy. So that is something that is a new approach, but also what the country is aiming toward it. So interesting in the fact that they're trying to listen to what the country really need rather than imposing on what they want to us. And this is usually, at least the recent approach that I have observed, what Australia has trying to sort of, if I rather put it bluntly, like putting a bracket or a separation between the traditional alliance system with US in that regards. Yeah.
Well, again, that's wonderful feedback for us to hear that we are responding to the needs, that we are understanding what's important and responding to those priorities. So I'll ask you if there's anything you want to respond on around that before we move over to questions.
Thank you, Melissa. As I listened to Shahriman and Charadin, I couldn't agree more with them because, yes, there are quite a lot of shared interest actually between Southeast Asian country with Australia. But please pay also attention that in Southeast Asia, country is not homogeneous. There are some countries that maybe deal with Australia in certain way, in the politically, economically, or socially, and different way from others. I think the close allies of Australia in Southeast Asia is Singapore, right? Maybe because the similarity of economic profile and also the interdependence in the capital market, etc. But there are also a lot of opportunity in other fields, maybe for defense and etc. And for the regular resilience. Indonesia play big roles because of the closeness in Australia in terms of the geographical location and also the social and cultural aspect in Indonesia that can also have effect a lot of in the region. But my point is different countries in Southeast Asia will need different treatment from Australia. And the whole, maybe the Southeast Asian country would like to establish a more also, as I mentioned before, go beyond the strategic and economic calculation of Australia. It's more on the genuine relation with people to people. I said people to people because it is much more sustainable. It is go beyond just government to government relation, even the government in the first contact, but governments always change. Every 5 years you change the government. So you cannot rely on one party or one elite only to have a more sustainable relation and build a shared future. We need a broader base of the relation, which is the people. And I would like to propose more attention to interaction between young people. Young people from Australia and young people from Southeast Asia should interact more. Whatever the view, whatever the mechanism. I understand that between Melbourne University and my university, we have used to be a very good summer course between our students. I run it with Dave and Professor Richard Schoffel. So I think this type of relation, and when the university and government create a possible environment for students and young people to meet, and maybe also people beyond the government and business, like people in arts, environmental activists, or maybe journalists. I think this is where the area that we need to work more together, because not
get the broad spectrum cooperation.
Yeah, I think so. I think this.
No, good. Well, I'm hoping a lot of those new Colombo Plan students, for example, can start travelling around the region again. And there, I should mention a wonderful initiative, if there's any young people on the call today. The ASEAN Australia Youth Strategic Partnership does a great job of having dialogues with young people across the region. And I think that's exactly what we want to see more of. So I'm going to turn to our questions now, because I love it when our audience are engaged and have things they want to ask. So two of our questions really talk a bit about those great power relations. So we have an anonymous attendee who's asked us, what does the deterioration of Australia-China relations mean to Southeast Asian nations? And from Kristen Wells, we have a question about whether AUKUS has created another point of division in ASEAN. So perhaps I'll let you deal with those together. I think those are two interesting ones. Ibu, shall I start with you, or do you want to think a little more?
I will pick up your first question regarding the Australia-China relation and Southeast Asia. I think there have been a lot of things happen between Australia and China domestically and in terms of regional and global relation with China. I see there is a different or a distance between Australia-China relation with Australia, with Australia, Southeast Asia, and Southeast Asia, China relations. So this kind of triangle relation between our three parties. And I see the relation between Australia and China seem not to affect Southeast Asia so much, because what happened between Southeast Asia and China is very much these two region relation, and to some extent, of course, influenced by United States and Western alliance. But regarding Australia and China, there is not much, not even much attention from Southeast Asia to what happened between Australia and China, especially on the domestic issues that happen in Australia regarding the China and their relation with China. However, I also pay attention. I pay attention to Professor White's suggestion several years ago regarding the Southeast Asia, Australia should have a close relation with Indonesia and South Asian countries to together face China, and even he suggested at that time to put Indonesia as a border, as a border area between Australia and China. I think his suggestion is one of the good example of how Australia put a forward defense strategy to not to face China in its soil, just like Australia faced Japan in World War, but rather to deal with it beyond territory. But this also caused another trouble for Indonesia, because it will bring Indonesia to this great power competition, which Indonesia doesn't want to, because we will keep with our free and active diplomacy for Indonesia. Relation with China and relation with the United States and Australia is we try to manage it as equal distant as possible. So. If Australia would like to engage Southeast Asia in its relation with China, I will return to your first question about the making of Southeast Asia as a theater of trade competition, which we don't really like to be engaged too much in that, because we have different relation with Australia, different relation with China, and also different relation with Indonesia. And remember, Southeast Asia, each of us actually have different priorities too. Maybe Malaysia and Cambodia relation with China and United States is different from the one with Indonesia. As the whole, to make it short, to answer your question, there's not much influence of Australia-China relation to Southeast Asia.
No, that's very interesting, and sounds like, very different from some places I've been. I spent part of last year in Taiwan, and everyone I spoke to was like, "What's going on with Australia-China relations?" Where it may not have the same salience in other areas.
Because Taiwan has very strong relation also with China and tension relation with China, right?
Well, over to you, Shahriman.
Me? Oh,
to you, Shahriman.
So far, the Chinese have not tried to regionalize or nationalize its issues with Australia, in the sense that, very much unlike, say, with Japan over Senkaku Diaoyu, for example, where you would have the Chinese side trying to sort of actively engage us, and tell us, essentially try to bring us to their side of the argument, basically. And all that. There's actual, real effort being put out to counter the other side's arguments. I've not experienced any of that at all. The Chinese have not tried to engage and to tell us, this is why you should disagree with Australia. So I think they have pretty much kept it confined to a bilateral thing, although the signal is unmistakable, right? We do see at least some countries in South Asia do see it as a signal that this is what happens to you if you do not behave.
Which I'm sure is part of what was intended.
Yes. So that's true. On the AUKUS thing, look, we are dealing with the AUKUS things together, right?
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Look, the reality of AUKUS is 8 submarines and stuff stuff Australia would have done anyway with the Americans and the Brits and so on and so forth. The trouble with AUKUS is the label AUKUS. You've created this label, this whole announcement thing, which made it look a lot bigger than it was, right? It's big in terms of how France is being treated. Yes, it's big. In terms of the magnitude of the technological transfer is big, but is it going to change the geopolitical configuration of the region? No. 8 submarines will not do that. And talking about 8 submarines delivered God knows when, right? You have F-35s in Australia and you can't use it to the full because the Americans can't provide you with spare parts. So that's not a good start to your submarine project, right? That's not a good signal. So I think AUKUS has been blown out of proportion. The Malaysian response, I believe, was due to a misunderstanding. I believe I'm not in government, obviously, misunderstanding of the nature of nuclear submarines. There's a
nuclear armed rather than nuclear powered.
Absolutely, yeah. The Indonesian response, I might get into trouble here, but I think the Indonesian response is partly because of its regional sense of entitlement. It feels that it needs to be consulted about every single thing, and it feels that it has this thing. I'm South Asia's biggest country. I ought to have a say on some of these things that happens to our region. So. The rest have not been terribly opposed to AUKUS, so I don't think there is a division. As far as divisions have occurred on AUKUS, it has been over a statement that was proposed by Indonesia for ASEAN to issue, right? And Vietnam said no, because it was not opposed to AUKUS. So that was the the only point of division that's occurred because of AUKUS. I don't think it will persist. In fact, I think it's much forgotten right now.
And from what you're saying, it sounds like it's as much about the signalling and the announcement as the substance in any case.
Yeah. There's not much to the seas. Yeah.
So over to you, Charadine. So have you seen from a Cambodian perspective that the deterioration in Australia-China relations has changed Australia-Cambodia relations at all?
Frankly, the deteriorations of Australia and China relation doesn't affect us much. It's not something that really have a direct impact really. So it's not that much compared to maybe one way or another the deteriorations or some like a major bust in relations between US and China in that sense. In terms of AUKUS, that maybe perhaps last month, I guess, the Australian foreign minister paid an official visit to Cambodia, and then of course meeting with our foreign ministers and stuff. And Australia has been more open and saying, like, honestly, more frank on the establishment of AUKUS, and reaffirm Australia commitments in, well, of course, security and stability in the region, but for us to see AUKUS as more of a protection or another allies, but not as a threat. So I think by that, and it was an over phone conversation even before the official visit coming. So I think it goes to show us how important we consider, or we raise our concern directly toward each other in that sense.
Thank you.
May I make a comment to the Shahriman response
please.
earlier regarding Indonesia response?
I was hoping you would, absolutely.
Because I think Indonesia respond not supported. It's not because Indonesia think we are the police or the biggest country in the region, but much more due to Indonesian very core strategic interest. We are the strategic countries in the region, and where the submarine will go through, it goes through Indonesian water territory. So this is what we are concerned about. And of course, we understand Vietnam will not respond negatively because the activation of Da Nang harbor for the American activities. So we can assume that if the submarine really arrive in Australia, it goes through Indonesian waters to the Da Nang, to the Vietnam, and where it goes through Indonesian waters. So it means that Indonesia will be passed through, will be placed where this submarine will be operated at the daily basis.
There's an interest in
That's a big issue.
Yeah.
My only response to that is that the law of the sea allows submarines to pass through Indonesian archipelagic waters. Not only Australian submarines, but also Malaysian submarines and Singapore submarines.
It is true, but if you already prepare a submarine with nuclear power, we have to pay attention on that. That's why trust building is important. This is why the dialogue and trust building by being transparent is important.
And communication across the region. Well, what I'm going to end with is a question for each of the panelists from Tom Barber, who does, I will fess it up, who does work with me at the Asia Pacific Development Diplomacy and Defence Dialogue. So at the risk of us sounding like we're too tough on ourselves, as you said, Shahriman, his question is, if you could change one aspect of Australia's engagement with Southeast Asia, what would it be and why? So I might go backwards. I might start with Shahriman if I can.
Oh, that's a tough question. I feel like thinking about. I'm not say this to rosy comment. Frankly, most of the approach that Australia has done in Cambodia is more receptive to our people and to our government. So it's rather tough for me in the moment to think of what could we change really. And
well, I'll take that as just keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah,
that's very positive. Thank you for that. Okay, well, Shahriman.
So look, I think I will go back to your first question, to the question of this webinar. What does South Asia want from Australia? I think the answer is in that question, in the sense that, number one, like Ibu Fitri said, there is no real Southeast Asia, in the sense that there are a lot of us to regard us as a single entity or a single region with very similar wants, wish lists is folly. Actually, I actually think this region, I think, has become slightly less cohesive in the last 10 years or so. So I think we are becoming more and more. Is contradictory. We have become more integrated as a region, but our strategic perspectives have diverged as a region. So I think to regard South Asia as 10 countries as much as it is as one economic community. The other thing is to also turn the question and say what South Asia can do for Australia. I think you need to establish a relationship where there is reciprocity, that when you look to South Asia, you ask, what does Australia want from Southeast Asia? I think South Asia can bring some things to the table. It's just that we haven't quite explored it yet. I think establishing that sense of two-way traffic, I think it's a good thing.
Well, and please do keep sharing that with colleagues across the region. And so, maybe just a last quick comment from you. If there was one thing you could change about Australia's engagement with Southeast Asia, what would it be?
It will be about the Australian tendency to spy on Indonesia because it has been a big issue in 15 or 10 years ago that Australia has to draw its Indonesia has to withdraw its embassy from Australia because of
clearly not forgotten.
No, it is not forgotten at all for Indonesia. This is why I think trust building is very important, and because of that scandal, up to now, a lot of Indonesia do not trust Australia. So I think this is where the relation, social and cultural relation, is important to nurture a more genuine relation rather than more strategic. But we understand this may be very difficult with Australia, given the fact that Australian survivability depends on the United States. But I think the issue of the spy is something that we very much regret on. That's why the issue on this submarine, the first submarine, become worse because we remember in the past we have this scandal.
So communication, trust, very important. Well, look, thank you. If I can say a huge thank you to all of our speakers, to Professor Fitriani from Universitas Indonesia, from Shahriman Lockman from ISIS Malaysia, and Shahriman from the Cambodian Institute for Cooperation and Peace. This has been a fabulous discussion. And from my side, I've taken from it that perhaps Australia is doing a bit better than we think. I heard some really positive things about the level of investment and focus that Australia is taking to Southeast Asia, and the way that we really are responding to Southeast Asian needs and priorities. I think there's more we can do in terms of trust building, in terms of going beyond the government level to make our engagement as broad-based as possible. So thank you all for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to host you on behalf of the Asia Institute. If I can very quickly say, the Asia Institute has another webinar coming up that I'll be hosting, which is on International Women's Day, looking at a feminist foreign policy, the case for feminist foreign policy in Asia. So look forward to speaking to you then, if you're able to join us. And if not, please do subscribe to the Melbourne Asia Review and keep in touch with our publications and our events. Thank you all again.
Thank you, Melissa. Well done. Very good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Hi,
Thank you,
Melissa.
Shahriman, Charadin. Thank you.